we've received quite a few messages about what is happening with Geordie's Lancer. Well, firstly, to take the car to the track, it needs a few things addressed. The fuel system first, but it also needs tyres. So what I'm going to do now is pick the car up and go get some tyres fitted, and then we'll take it from there.
It's been some time since we introduced our Mitsubishi Lancer GSR. We'd like to utilise the car more, potentially in a motorsport environment. Previously, we've had fuel surge issues when running the car at a circuit. Eager to go run the car again, we decided that a fuel system upgrade was required. While piecing our list of fuel parts together, we also sourced a new set of tyres more suitable for the car. The Lancer has always used Potenza Adrenalin rubber. These have worn well, but at the track quickly lose grip after a hard lap. With that in mind, we paid a visit to Bridgestone, where the guys offered up a set of stickier Potenza RE-71R tyres. The new-to-market RE-71Rs are a compromise between a street and race tyre and should give much more grip, particularly for an extended period. The 50 series profile is slightly taller than our outgoing 205 45s we've run for many years, and we're happy to report we haven't seen much of an increase in road noise.
Okay, so we've just got some new tyres fitted in the Lancer. Pretty nice looking tyres. They're a slightly bigger profile. They're a 50 series. The ones on it were a 205 45 16. These are a 50 series. And luckily we didn't go a bigger size because they only just fit on. They're actually rubbing on the front left in a guard, so I'll modify that when I get back to Jordo's house. Nothing major, but these cars have very small guards. You can't fit much tyre under them at all. I was a bit worried they might be noisy on the road. This car's a bit rough as it is, but they're no worse than the tyre that was on it, so that's great for a stickier tyre. I will say one thing, I haven't driven this car in a good 5 years, I'd say, and it's so responsive. Awesome clutch in it, really direct, easy to drive. The car's got heaps of low down torque, far better than my Subaru. It's just light, it drives like a go-kart. If you had a good gearbox in this car, that's probably what lets it down a bit. It's a little bit sloppy.
With the new tyres on the car, it was time we turned our focus to the surging issues. With the current setup only making moderate power, we wanted to not only solve the fuel surge, but also be capable of a future power upgrade and have the option of using E85. Stock EFI cars tend to have poorly baffled fuel tanks, which usually, as a result of hard cornering, will starve the fuel pump for short periods from a constant fuel flow. This will in turn affect fuel pressure leaving the tank. In my case, the engine will cut out intermittently when accelerating out of a corner. The factory tank is located under the rear seats and has a saddle-style shape as it goes over the floor tunnel. The tank relies on using a Venturi effect to move fuel from the passive side to the active side of the tank. The purpose of a surge tank is that the fuel pump delivering fuel to the rail will always have full fuel flow, therefore providing constant fuel pressure. The existing fuel pump in the main tank will now act as a lift pump and keep the small surge tank full of fuel. This will also take a lot of load off the first pump, as the extra pump in the surge tank will be a high pressure unit, effectively doing more of the work.
After 300 meters, keep left, National Route 1.
We decided to call in at Marcos at Motorsport Connections in Moorabbin and discuss what we wanted to achieve. Motorsport Connections specialises in parts and accessories for all forms of motorsport. With the complete range of Speedflow products, they can tailor anything required for your application.
So I guess the first thing we have to do with this fuel system is measure up what room we've got available in this car and where it's going. Is that correct?
Yeah, we want to crack the boot, we want to find out where we're mounting the tank and where the lines are going to exit and enter back into the tank.
Alright, let's have a look. So we'll take out this floor.
And the first thing we want to look for is maybe some access panels to see if there's, some cars have it underneath the seat and some cars have it directly in the boot. So we'd want to use the access panel as an entry and an exit point and find out whether the car's got it in the boot or under the seat. If it doesn't have it in the boot, well then we have to possibly drill some holes.
After looking into where and how a surge tank could possibly be installed in the boot, I changed my mind and decided against the idea, as I didn't want the already small boot space compromised, and this would also move any pump noise to the outside of the car instead of increasing cabin noise. The insulation and sound deadening in cars of this age is virtually non-existent. There would also be possibly fuel smell inside the car. The disadvantage of mounting the tank under the car will be the restricted space available, so the tank will definitely need to be smaller. Apart from where the tank would be mounted, we also needed to address what fuel hose is suitable from the existing fuel lines to the surge tank.
Yeah, the factory fuel lines are 8mm or 5/16 inch steel,
Yep.
and they'll make a ton of power on petrol. So unless you plan on going on E85, which consumes maybe 30% extra fuel, then we'll have to upgrade the volume. But up until that point, you can keep the factory lines, and we'll just tee into them or plumb into them, and you'll be fine.
So Marcus, now it's time to choose the fuel lines. Bear in mind, probably going to go flex fuel in the future, so it needs to be 85 compliant. What are our options with the factory lines?
It comes down to two hoses. You can either go for a cosmetic shiny hose, which is the Teflon series braided hose, and you're always going to get away with any transfer of fluid through there. E85, petrol, doesn't matter what goes through it. And if you want to keep it inconspicuous and factory fitting so you can push onto standard barbs, you can go to a barricade fuel hose. So it's a standard rubber hose with standard barbs, and the benefit of that is if we have to cut and flare, that can cause some grief with the Teflon series braided hoses, because you can only use screw-on ends. So there are your two options. You go to a braided hose, Teflon series, and you're never going to have a problem with any fuels going through there. But you can also go to a barricade push-on hose, and that's E85 compatible too.
Are there any consequences with the rubber hose with moisture with the 85? Is it more susceptible to pull moisture
Maybe in the past,
in cold weather?
Maybe in the past, in factory-fitted cars with factory hoses, you would see some of them fail or deteriorate or come under pressure by the 85, but the new hoses available, no, not at all. This is the Teflon Series -6 braided hose, but again, you have to use screw-on fittings everywhere. You can't push onto a barb here.
Yeah, so
and
the
because
fittings are a bit more complicated.
Correct,
Yeah.
and because you've got a standard sender unit in your car or a standard cradle, you may have a lot of options where you need to push onto a hard line or push onto a standard plastic sender unit, and at that point, it makes it much easier to push on a rubber hose the right size and clamp it. So this is your barricade E85 compatible rubber hose. You can basically put any type of petroleum through it and it will handle the test of time.
And what I do like about this, I mean, it's obviously cheaper, but it's got that factory rubber look. So it's in line with the car. The car's not a flashy car, or it's meant to have a very stock street feel to it.
That's right. It makes the job a lot easier too, not having to modify, cut and shut things, because we just want to patch in a surge tank, so we stop that surging issue.
These are your Days of Thunder special fuel line.
Extra half a gallon of gas. Completely illegal, but somehow they get away with it.
You need a feed from the main tank to the surge tank. You need a return from the rail to the surge tank, because we want as much fuel delivery to that thing as possible. Everything that we can get back that needs to return or overflow, it goes to the surge tank, keeps that thing chock-a-block at all times. And then where it breathes from, or where it overflows to, is the back to the main tank's breather, the original return point from the fuel rail. So that's where we go back to, and that should keep that thing topped up at all times. So we need 3 adapters and 3 hose fittings for that, and they're all 8mm to suit the standard fuel lines in the car. Everything will be nice and easy, clamped on with that barricade hose we talked about, which is E85 compatible and petrol compatible too.
Like what a lot of guys do these days, I also prefer the black fittings. The blue and red stuff doesn't really go in line with the type of car these days, and everyone's after that stealth and basically a factory stock look.
Now that we had the hose and fittings sorted to connect to a surge tank, Marcus decided to take me for a spin in his 13V rotary turbo.
How's that? Oh, pretty cool. The rotor, okay. It's pretty quiet actually.
Yeah.
When it comes on boost, it makes some noise. So a bit later today, we're going to go down to Denalo Performance, and he's going to have a look at the fuel system, have a bit of an issue with the petrol tank. We'll sort that out and go from there.
We then took the car to see Ben at Denello Performance. Ben specialises in just about anything that's turbocharged and advised us on how the surge problems could be solved and how a tank could be mounted underneath. Upon inspection, it was found that the rubber feed hose from the in-tank pump was degrading, so that was replaced with some E85 compatible hose. The area under this car has limited space, and as I am also not chasing high horsepower, I decided to use a small single pump surge tank from Aeroflow. Being such a small size, it could be mounted further away from the rear of the car, minimising risk of damage if the car was involved in a rear end accident. This tank came with welded brackets, but that didn't suit how it needed to be mounted up against the chassis rail. The brackets were cut off and the tank was positioned in place to work out where the new brackets would need to be welded on. Once welded and painted, a Bosch 044 fuel pump was inserted in the tank and bolted to the rail. We were now ready to start looking at running the new fuel lines. The tank obviously needs fittings to be plumbed into the system. This is where the AN fittings are screwed straight into the tank to be connected to the new fuel hoses.
We're at Denello Performance today and we're starting a fuel upgrade on my Lancer. So the first stage today is to get the surge tank running in the factory fuel system and make sure there's no issues with fuel pressure. And then later on at another stage, we'll upgrade the fuel rail, injectors and so forth, and probably E85. But just today we're into the surge tank, and then hopefully that will fix the surge issues we've had at the racetrack, and then we can take this out for a track day on these new tyres.
It was time to start on the tedious job of connecting the new fuel lines into the existing system. The first step was running a power wire up the side of the car to a relay for the extra fuel pump.
In order to run the fuel pump and not overload the system, a relay's been put in to control it. So that's mounted here, in the boot here. So once the carpet goes back in, you won't see any of this.
This was wired into the factory fuel pump circuit.
So what do you got there? Oh, this is all the fuel parts we're using in the car, but today we're just we're hooking up the surge tank and making sure that all works fine before worrying about changing the front of the car. So we'll sort out the first part of it first. But what I do have, what is going on the car, this is an Aeroflow fuel rail because the what we have got is larger injectors, 1000 cc's. They won't go in the standard fuel rail, so we're replacing the fuel rail with this Aeroflow unit. It's designed for the car, so that should bolt on. And then what I've also got a bunch of fittings from Motorsport Connections, and Turbo Smart. We've got this fuel rig, just the little one, but it's more than enough for this setup, which is a little where is it? A little 800, small one, but it'll be more than enough for this setup. It's Turbo Smart, so very popular and very high quality. First of all, I didn't really want a tank in the boot because there are other reasons for that, for fuel smell, and also we put camera equipment in the boot. So it's a single pump. As you can see, it's quite small. I think it holds about 2 litres of fuel. So it's got a 044 pump. That'll feed the fuel rail up to the front, and then you've got 3 outlets on here. One is an overflow, one is the return from the fuel rail, and one is obviously fuel from the fuel tank feeding it.
And you've had to put some brackets on that.
Yeah, we've also welded these brackets on, because this was just a square tank, and we've welded these brackets on to suit the rail, so that's not going anywhere now, that's mounted. And then these will run lines up through discreetly as possible and up to the fuel tank.
The barricade rubber fuel hose is then pushed onto the AN barb fittings for a secure seal. Where the other end of the lines connect isn't so straightforward.
So this is the factory fuel system, and we've taken this line off. Now the issue is these fittings aren't very compatible, so we're going to actually cut this off and weld on a barb so we can attach an AN fitting to this, which we'll do now.
With the connection fitting modified to suit the factory feed line, our hose from the fuel tank to the surge tank was complete. The other lines were connected and checked for leaks. Although this task may look simple, it's a tedious job, as there isn't a lot of room to work with. With the new surge tank plumbed in, the next step will be to check the tune is unaffected before we run the car at the circuit. The tune in this car has not been adjusted in over 6 years, so it's a good time to do a health check on how the engine is still performing.